Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Community Platform on UCTV. There's a word that I used to be very comfortable with once. The word, of course, is prevent. For me, it was very much a word that would keep you away from something and negativity, so to speak, until it became entangled in the prevent duty. Prevent has been quoted as duty in the Counterterrorism and Security Act of 2015 to prevent people from committing terrorism. However, Muslim communities believe it is an ill-defined policy targeting the Islamic community and has a terribly damaging impact on Muslim lifestyle. Who better to explain not only what is prevent, brief introduction, other than Dr. Layla, who's a caseworker for Prevent Watch. Prevent Watch is an organization that came about. I think I'm going to allow Dr. Layla to tell us because I'm not 100% sure at the moment. What is Prevent all about? So without further ado, by the way, let me just tell you, Dr. Layla is a scientist and a research. She's done her research, and now she's working for Prevent Watch as a caseworker. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Layla.
Wa alaikum salam.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
And Ramadan Kareem to you. A bit late in the day for me to be wishing you Ramadan Kareem, but it's been a long time since we met.
Ramadan Kareem, no, Jazakallah for that. I know it's come and gone quickly.
I know, it's unbelievable how fast it has gone. I want to actually dive into this. Give us a brief intro to not only Prevent Watch, but just before that, I would like you to just tell us something about Prevent.
Yeah, so Prevent is part of the government's counterterrorism strategy, and it's often cited by many of the security officials as one of the most important strands of the strategy. So unlike other strands of the strategy, Prevent operates in what is clearly a very kind of pre-criminal space by trying to detect people who are vulnerable to becoming terrorists in the future. So it's not actually based on disrupting any action or preventing any action or preventing any intention. It's actually based on disrupting and reconfiguring identities and ideas that have nothing to do with terrorism. And the policy itself was introduced in 2003 by Tony Blair's government, but it became law about 5 years ago in 2015, which in practical terms meant that all public sector workers have a legal duty to have due regard to prevent people from being drawn into terrorism. And in order for public sector workers to do this duty, they're trained on how to spot signs of radicalization, and they usually have about 1 or 2 hours of training sessions specifically developed by the Home Office in order to do this. It's a very, very short session, and it's exactly what we think it is. It plays on all the prejudices and
Hello? I think we have lost, we're just going to quickly redial to see if we can get Dr. Layla back on again. Dr. Layla was talking about his from a historical perspective. Let's see. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Layla. Something happened there. We lost you.
I'm not sure where it cut off at, but yeah. So basically, everyone in the public.
Yeah, I think we just got cut off. There is a slight hitch. Just bear with me. My colleague is going to fix that.
Sure.
Do we have you back?
Yep. Can you hear
brilliant. I'm so sorry. Can you just take us back? You were talking about the Prevent agenda and its relation to the counterterrorism.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, I was saying that it's not actually, Prevent isn't actually based on disrupting or preventing any action or disrupting any intentions of someone committing an act of terror. It's based on disrupting identities and ideas that have nothing to do with terrorism. And it was introduced as a policy in 2003. And then five years ago in 2015, it became a legal duty. So in practical terms, all public sector workers have a legal duty to have due regard to prevent people from being drawn into terrorism. And in order for these public sector workers to carry out their duty, they're trained on how to spot signs of radicalization in a 1 to 2 hour training session that's been designed by the Home Office. I mean, you can do it online now. So if we just pan out, because obviously that's quite specific, okay, there are signs of radicalization, but if you pan out in terms of what that means, sort of like a bird's eye view, you essentially have about 5 million public sector workers in the UK. Right? Every single one of them has a legal duty to have due regard for, to prevent people being drawn into terrorism. So you've got 5 million people at least who have been trained in spotting the signs of radicalization, who are essentially observing members of the public, whether it's your teacher observing their student or it's your doctor observing their patient. They're essentially observing them for these signs with this burden of having a legal duty to report it if they feel that one of those signs has come up. And that's without the numbers, including the private sector, because you've got places like Marks and Spencer, McDonald's, Boots, all of those who have adopted the training for their staff as well. And to be honest, every year, it's no wonder every year there are approximately 7,000 people referred to Prevent, and those are just based on the Home Office statistics. But there's good news for people who are listening who are Muslim. I'm assuming that a majority of your audience are Muslim. So there's some really good news, is that as a Muslim, you're approximately 20 times more likely to be referred to Prevent. And I say it's good news because 2 years ago, you were 50 times more likely to be referred to Prevent than a non-Muslim. But the bad news is that those figures assume that Home Office statistics are actually a true representation of Prevent referrals. But we know anecdotally that a lot of people have been referred to Prevent, but they don't end up making the statistics because it's stopped at a certain point in the pipeline before it becomes a Home Office statistic. But that doesn't avoid any of the impact or experience and make it any less traumatic for those who have been referred.
Yes, well, it's quite devastating. These figures that you've given, quite devastating, aren't they? I mean, 30%. It's absolutely amazing. But just we'll pick up on the statistics. Just tell me, why was there a need for Prevent Watch? How did it come about?
So Prevent Watch came about in 2015 when that shift occurred from Prevent going from being a policy to becoming legislation. So there were community activists who were already active in campaigning against Prevent, and they recognized quite quickly that this change was going to lead to an increase in Prevent referrals because people would now be under that legal obligation and feel that pressure of the legal obligation to report on others. Even if deep down they too believe that these markers of radicalization were flawed, they would then still feel that need that, I have to actually report it because it's a legal duty. So Prevent Watch came about because we wanted to capture the human impact of Prevent on the community by documenting the cases, and also in order to provide these individuals who had been referred with access to justice, be it via legal assistance or by helping them get some media coverage to expose what was happening, or by compiling the trends and the themes that we saw and giving them to researchers who could then use it to start pushing for change about Prevent.
So this initiative, Prevent Watch, was a community initiative? I mean, did it happen with people who thought that they needed something to help those people who have been targeted? Yeah,
precisely. It was a community initiative, and it still pretty much is. I mean, Prevent Watch has a single caseworker, and that caseworker is supported by a huge network of volunteers. Some of those volunteers are community members. Some of those volunteers are lawyers who give us their time, and some of them are journalists. So we have research interns. So it's still very much a community-based initiative, because in terms of staffing, it's still a very, very small organisation. We have very limited resources. Even though we've been going for 5 years, we've managed to do that with the help of the community.
Is Prevent, does it only affect adults, or are there young people or children involved in this?
So what we see is a wide spectrum. I mean, we've got cases where a child was essentially, I say a child, the child wasn't even born. The child was still in the mother's womb, and you had Prevent officers with social workers telling the mother that they needed to make sure that the child was safe from being radicalized, was not going to be vulnerable to radicalization. The child had not even been born yet. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum where you have pensioners who, have been referred. So it doesn't, in terms of age, the majority are children. So we have over 50% of our cases does impact children, and even the Home Office statistics suggest that more than half of the referrals are children. But there is a wide range in terms of ages.
Dr. Layla, has there been any effort on the part of Prevent Watch to have a conversation with those who actually, organize Prevent, the government policies and the government officialdom? Has there been any thing done to say, let's have a conversation, for goodness sake, where if the children are being involved, that's quite concerning, isn't it?
So Prevent Watch is not the only organisation that's been campaigning around Prevent. For a long time, there have been other organisations as well campaigning, and not just organisations, but individuals and experts. You've got UN special rapporteurs who have said, Prevent is damaging communities, it's stigmatising them, it doesn't conform to human rights laws. So it's not just Prevent Watch that have been campaigning about Prevent. There are other people who are a lot closer to, sort of corridors of government who have also been discussing it, and they still haven't been, listened to. I think there was one interaction, at least, with, I think it was the head of Prevent, National Coordinator for Prevent, where he essentially wanted some kind of, explanation of the cases, or, when the cases come in, you can talk to us about it. But, it's very difficult to have any relationship with anyone who is pro-Prevent without then, they have strings attached. There's a reason why they want to listen to the cases. There's a reason why they want to get involved, and it's not because they want to help the clients. So no, we've taken a very kind of strict stance in terms of staying as far away from anyone pro-Prevent as possible. I mean, there are other organisations who are better placed to have those conversations about, making change. So what we provide really, the core of our service, is providing those cases, providing the experience of what is happening on the ground, so that others can use it to make change, as opposed to us then using it to navigate any particular change. We're primarily there for the support of the clients. If you look at the other organisations that are campaigning against Prevent, there's some amazing work there, but there is very little for those who are impacted by Prevent. Like, there's not a single organisation out there that helps the clients. So as you've got these 7,000 odd people being referred to Prevent every year, who is there to help them whilst government is having conversations about Prevent reviews and actually not really getting around to it? And the only place at the moment is Prevent Watch, and that's what we do.
Dr. Layla, we're just going to take a short break, and then we will return, I think, within the next 1 minute. Please bear with us, okay? Join me back on Community Platform on UCTV. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Community Platform on UCTV. Before the break, we were talking to Dr. Layla, a caseworker, Prevent Watch, and she had been highlighting not a brief introduction to Prevent policies, what it is, how it impacts, and what has been really a worry for many, many people, particularly the Muslim community, that it's impacting Muslim way of life. One of the questions that I wanted to ask Dr. Layla, Dr. Layla, can you highlight kind of cases that you may have dealt with?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So currently we've dealt with more than 500 cases since we've been running. Each case is unique, but they broadly kind of fall into two categories. So you'll have a category of prevent referrals or prevent engagement or involvement where there's some association be it through family or through friends, with someone who is a convicted terrorist or who has been labelled as an extremist. And then the second category is where there's absolutely no association, but something has been said or done that's provoked a referral because the person making the referral, who's gone through their training of signs of radicalization, has done exactly what they've been trained to do, which is to tap into their bias and prejudice. Mm-hmm. So we've had a recent case where someone was referred to Prevent, and you can see quite clearly on the paperwork, because once she requested all the paperwork for her case in terms of what's happened in the background, that the only reason that she was referred was because she is Muslim. She converted to Islam. Now, that featured very, very heavily in all of the notes that spoke about concern about how vulnerable she may be. And that's because one of the risk factors for Prevent or for being vulnerable to radicalization is, a transitional period. So if you go through a transitional period, you're seen as at risk of radicalization. Another point they mentioned, which was really ridiculous, especially given that, how we live in this day and age, is that she met her partner online. This was a red flag. Like, she met her partner online. Now, he wasn't someone who was online in Syria or anything like that. Like, this was just online, another Muslim who she met online, and she decided to marry. There's entire industries built upon marrying people online or finding your perfect soulmate online, and yet this was flagged up as one of the reasons why she was referred to Prevent. So that was one specific case. Another case was of a young child, 5-year-old child, who was playing video games.
Sorry, did you say 5-year-old child?
5-year-old child in reception who playing video games, is known for playing video games, a boisterous young boy. And he mentioned one day, clearly in reference to the video games, that there were some guns in the shed. And that same evening, uniformed police officers turn up at the house of that child because a Prevent referral had been made. And now an officer was going to investigate because they thought there was an urgent risk. Now, what's really worrying is that in all of the cases, but specifically in these two cases, somebody had, an adult who had gone through this training had thought it was okay to refer that person to Prevent. And that adult didn't just make the decision by themselves. They had to go first to their senior. Their senior also then decided, yes, whatever you're saying right now, these ridiculous points of concern that you've raised, they seem like they're okay to go for a Prevent referral. And then they've contacted the Prevent team, who every time there's a Prevent referral, a police officer actually looks at it to see if it's malicious or if it warrants any concern. And then the police officer has decided, so you've got 3 adults, that this warrants in some kind of investigation. You've got 3 adults, and in that chain, not a single person has thought, you know what, let's just wait a minute. Like, this might not be, the signs of a future terror offender. It's not even a terrorist now, but like a future terror offender, someone who could be vulnerable to terrorism in the future. So that's what's quite scary, is that just that lack of stopping and reflecting and thinking, okay, this could be quite normal for a young child to say that who's playing video games.
I mean, I remember reading about a young man who was doing a PhD I believe he was doing a PhD, and he was actually investigating, and I think he was doing something on the Prevent agenda, where he downloaded documents, and he was, I think he was arrested for some time and investigated. But where does one stop? Can I go on go online and investigate a certain aspect of terrorism without having Prevent agenda officials knocking on my door? Is there how much I can do? What can't I do?
Well, that's the thing, is that, you see, Prevent, when it started, was looking very much at, extremism, very much within the context of Muslims and Islam, and it was kind of looking at trying to prevent forms of violent extremism. And then it went on to looking at non-violent extremism. And then it shifted again to looking at, from ideological non-violent extremism to non-ideological non-violent extremism. And then recently, the head commission of countering extremism has been speaking about what's it called, extreme hate or hate extremism. Basically, it's hate crime, but now it has the label of extremism on it. So as the definitions keep on kind of stretching and realigning into whatever is convenient for the government of the day, no, I don't really think there is a limit, because you can essentially use this term and you can use these set of beliefs to apply it to anyone who goes against the status quo.
Life seems to have become very difficult for some communities. The other thing is that we've said and we've heard that Prevent is impacting Islamic way of life and those community members who happen to be Muslims. Yet I find that majority of the people working on the ground for Prevent are Muslims themselves. Why the contradiction? What's going on here?
So it's interesting you say that. So I think the reason why is, initially when Prevent was, when Prevent was rolled out, it was for Muslims, and the aim was to get it run by Muslims. So it was for Muslims, by Muslims. A lot of Muslim organizations were given funding to carry out, courses which were related to Prevent, and then to just be part of Prevent. And then as people realized what that was and realized they lost a lot of credibility by accepting the funding from Prevent, they moved away from that. A lot of people realized what Prevent was as well in terms of Muslim community and came away from it. But that doesn't mean that, still these opportunities are there for Muslims to get involved in very senior, positions of Prevent officers. We had one Prevent officer turn up, and he was speaking to a young child. It's actually one of the cases on our website. If you go to www.preventwatch.org, you'll see the Quran case where one of the officers was actually a Muslim officer, and they interrogated this 8-year-old child at school without the consent of his parents, and one of the things they asked him to do was to recite the Quran. And the Muslim officer then continued to praise the young boy of his recitation and his tajweed and say, you did a really good job. So I think this isn't like a new tactic. This tactic has happened before, where the oppressed community essentially ends up having players oppressing them that are from within their own community. And I think one of the things that Muslims need to be very conscious of is that, spying and suspicion, which is essentially what Prevent is forbidden. Like, you can't do that. And given that Prevent operates in this pre-criminal space where no crime has been committed, no intention has even been made, then, Muslims shouldn't be engaging in this type of behavior. And it's important that, there are a lot of Muslims out there who still believe that, there is a problem, it's a Muslim problem, we need to own it. And that's why they tend to sort of take that ownership and say, look, wouldn't you rather that we take it on as Muslims than have someone else take it on and we can deal with the issue? But, it stretches a lot further than that. I mean, I went to a meeting with one of the clients. It was a child in need meeting, and all of the teachers from the different schools for the children were there in the room, and the social worker was there. And every single one of them, except one of the teachers, was non-Muslim, and they all gave amazing reports about the children. I'm saying, like, these children put any of our children to shame. Like, they A-star students all throughout. Here you've got a mother who's raising these 5 children on her own, and all of them are having glowing reports from the teachers. And the one teacher who is reporting on one of the children, who happens to be Muslim, she somehow manages to read this glowing report about the child, and she does so in such a begrudging manner that you wouldn't even think it was a glowing report. I actually had to listen quite carefully to make sure that what she was saying was positive, because her body language didn't match her speech. And I felt that she was overcompensating for the fact that she was Muslim, you know, and didn't want to come across as being biased in any way. And so she was actually the one teacher who raised one concern about the child. And it was such a pathetic concern. Like, it wasn't even a concern, but somehow she managed to turn it into a concern. And I think they're so conscious of trying to not be biased that she ended up being biased in the opposite direction. And I think that complex, and it is an inferiority complex, and it is a consequence of being an oppressed community, of being a suspect community for so long, is that you think, well, I've got 2 options. I'm either of the oppressed or I'm an oppressor. And they forget about the third part, which is that, okay, you're neither oppressed nor are you an oppressor, but you're someone who's going to stand up and, you know, fight for what you believe in, stand up for what you essentially have a lot of rights. A lot of our clients, once they figure out what their rights are, they're very strong, they're very brave, and they manage to navigate through this entire engagement process with Prevent without having to really cooperate with Prevent because they're not legally obliged to. And come out on the other end. Obviously, it's still a traumatizing experience. Nobody wants to go through it, but they are strong enough to do that. And we have everything within our own community. But we shouldn't be feeling this massive inferiority and think that we need to play the part.
Dr. Layla, we've literally got, I think, 2 minutes or 1.5 minutes. Just tell me in 1 minute, what can we do on the ground to assist organizations like yours who are working so hard to help the Muslim community?
I mean, we are an organization that runs solely on community funding. So if you can donate to Prevent Watch, please do at preventwatch.org/donate. You can follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. But also you can, like I said, we're 20 times more likely to be referred as a Muslim to Prevent. So come to the website and know your rights, know your information. One client actually had a Prevent officer and social workers knocking on her doors for 45 minutes, and she did not open that door. And the reason she didn't open that door is because she had the foresight to clean herself up beforehand. And so, alhamdulillah, that was really beneficial for her. And I think the more people understand and the more people are armed with that knowledge, the better they will be in these circumstances, inshallah.
Dr. Layla, I wish we could talk for a long more time, and I'm sure that at some point we will get you back. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for having me on.
No. Seriously, I know it's Ramadan and it's cooking time, for goodness sake. Where,
I was organised enough to cook beforehand, yes. So that's what I think. Be organised enough to know about Prevent beforehand.
Thank you so much. You know, it's the word prevent. Dr. Layla mentioned a word which was called entrapment, and what a wonderful word it is, because it's very satanic, the word entrapment. And we, as Muslims, know that Satan is locked up during Ramadan. But what do we do with Prevent? Please join me next week for another community platform. Jazakallah khair. Look after yourself and your neighbor, whoever they may be.